I was using pretty much daily for 6 months. The methadone every morning and the heroin. And I remember asking myself, like, a week before I got clean, I was like, do I think I'm ever going to get clean off of methadone and heroin? And there's always that hope. There's always like, yeah, there's but it's the hope was just the longer my addiction went on, the hope went further and further down. And that's, I think, what made it compound so much. When you lose hope, it just gets so much worse.
The name of the podcast is The Big Questions. And every guest I have, I always ask them the same question. The first one: who are you, sir?
Yeah, I'm Rory. My name's Rory. I'm from Vermont, and my brother and I started doing this podcast, Cultivating Connections. It kind of happened organically. There's a whole backstory, but I started getting clean from drugs, and we were like, what better to what should we do in our free time? Let's talk about our issues, our struggles, openly and honestly, and see how that goes for us. And so far it's been great because it's allowed us to have some insight into our past and kind of some resolve over just things that we talk about. And then it's like we put it out there to the world, on our podcast, and there's no hiding from it then, you know what I mean? So it's kind of like it raises the stakes, but it's also a very healing thing.
Yeah, cathartic, right? I mean, bringing it out into the open, talking about it in front, especially when you're sharing it with an audience. I mean, yeah, it's definitely, I can see that.
Yeah, and like a lot of the people that have listened to it are well, there's a whole range of different people that have heard it, and different people in different countries even, which is a surprise to me in a way. Pretty cool. But also a lot of people from our past that maybe never got some closure in just friendships and whatnot, and so they're able to listen to it and hear it from my perspective, which I think is important. I think it's important to hear a story from everyone's perspective. And yeah, so Cultivating Connections, it's we're super into like mushrooms, not only the psychedelic mushrooms. Obviously, mushrooms are just fascinating in general. And so like this a hobby of ours is like going out in the woods. Like this summer we found like a bunch of different species of different mushrooms, and we thought that was great. And so cultivating kind of comes with like I guess you can use cultivating in the in terms of like gardening and mushrooms, but cultivating, like, we're really trying to, I don't know, there's just something between like the mushroom cultivating and also connections. The mushroom has trillions and trillions of connections. So we kind of we don't look at it like, well, we look at it as like a symbol. It's like, the mushroom is able to have massive amounts of connections. So, human brains, we can have connections too. And I think that's like the goal of it, is to, like, do what we're doing right here, just have connections. Like if it wasn't for my podcast, I wouldn't be talking to you right now. So
Right, exactly. No, I totally get what you're saying. And yeah, I mean, we can get into mushrooms too. That's pretty awesome that you sort of have gotten into all types of mushrooms. And I have a couple friends who are avid mushroom pickers and like connoisseurs. Like every time we're hiking out in the woods, they're like, "Oh, this is a, Maximus Rexus," and I'm like, "Okay, cool." But it's, yeah, there's some crazy healing mushrooms out there, right? I mean, there's types of mushrooms that can heal you. There's types that can like expand your lung capacity. I think, like they were high altitude people were consuming these mushrooms and they were able to like live in these high mountains and stuff. So it's a whole can of worms, right?
it's super cool. And I love the ability to like go out into the forest and be like, oh, I actually know what that mushroom is. Like I never knew before and it's just it's not like I'm studying mushroom books at all. I'm just noticing it for the first time and then going home and looking up trying to find the mushroom. And then next time I go out, I'm like, that's cool. Like I know that. And it feels good. It feels, I've learned probably like 10 or 12 different species of mushrooms this summer that I just didn't know about before. So, and it's also cool, like you said, your friends who know, you're around them, and it's like it's just cool to like to be able to talk about it with people.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's empowering too. I mean, if you're ever lost in the woods, I imagine it's like, well, at least I can figure out which ones I can eat, and you have some frame of reference there.
Yeah, yeah. There's a bunch of different things to look for on mushrooms for sure.
Yeah, but the types of mushrooms that we're going to be talking about, I think, are a very specific kind, or maybe not. I don't know. I actually tried not to get too much into your videos because I like going into these types of conversations without a lot of preconceived knowledge, right? So I kind of know
Hmm.
the broad strokes, which we're going to get into, but diving
Yeah,
into it, I don't know the particulars. So why don't we start off with, you came right up front with it, and you said, you got clean from drugs. So what was your struggle, and why don't you tell me about how you kind of had been able to overcome it in the last year?
yeah, absolutely. I'd love to do that. It's difficult um to talk about like what has helped me specifically getting clean, but I think I've nailed it down, and I think we can talk about it. But you know, I was always fascinated by drugs, always. I mean, my dad is a psychiatrist, MD psychiatrist, and so he prescribes medicine for his profession. He's extremely well versed and very educated on different medicines and pharmaceuticals, especially. And I don't know if that kind of trickled down or if all humans have a fascination about drugs. But when I was about like, I was like 13. I don't know, I was in eighth grade, and it's funny because I was like so against weed, and but my best friend had smoked weed, and as soon as I heard that, it could have been anybody, but except for this one person. As soon as I heard this person did it, something switched in my brain. It's like, okay, now I want to try it, and like immediately before that, I was just so against it.
Right.
So I don't know how that works.
I'm sure there's an explanation. Maybe your dad could help us with that, but
Yeah, right. I think I just, yeah, I
was
don't
it
know. I
someone you
just,
looked up to, or was it
oh
someone that
yeah,
you yeah, okay. So
absolutely. Yeah, the whole story with him. I mean, we can get into that later, but he was like the light in my eyes. Like he would walk into a room and people would kind of, they're just naturally, they'd have a little smirk or a little smile, like, brighten up the room a bit. And,
wow.
yeah, anyway, so yeah, so then I smoked with him for the first time, and I got all giggly and just, whoa, like, wow. Like, it wasn't really what the drug education people told me it was at all whatsoever. I mean, you know, the downfalls are there. There are downfalls, obviously, but my experience wasn't what anybody had told me it would be like, which in a way is going to be that way because it's subjective anyway.
Sure.
But
But I
I would,
mean, there's like, differences in experience, and then there's no way anybody could experience this. Like some of those
exactly.
infomercials, right? Hey Timmy, like
Yeah,
clearly
yeah.
those people never smoke pot.
Exactly. I like the I don't know if you've seen Harold and Kumar, but
Yes.
they're getting stoned on the couch and they're flipping through the channels
Yeah.
right before they get to the White Castle commercial. There's this kid smoking. He gets this like starry-eyed look, or like, oh my God. He's like, he goes up, takes a shotgun, shoves it down his mouth, and his friend's like, oh my God, what are you doing? And he goes, I'm so high. Boom.
Exactly,
And
right? Nothing
it's
like
like,
that.
yeah, no, not at all. And it's yeah, I don't want to get into like the politics of all that, but it's, in my opinion, like if we could improve the drug education, I could see many ways how we could do that. But
Yeah,
anyway,
well, we can talk about that too, man. I'm down for all those topics. But anyway, so that was the first experience with drugs or illicit drugs for you, was like around 13, you smoked a joint.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I had experience with Ritalin when I was really young because I was put on it. But um, I didn't like it. Anyway, yeah, my first illicit experience with cannabis, and I'll tell you this, it was one of the most healing endeavors or experiences. Like it was just such a cathartic release. But what happened over time was that that relationship I had to cannabis changed because people I was like one of the first people in my whole grade to do it. So like other people heard about it and started talking about me, or not necessarily talking about me, but just getting this idea of what that meant to them. and running with it because that's what we do as humans. And so like my relationship to weed changed, and I would smoke around other people, and it would just be like traumatic experiences because I just didn't, my first relationship with weed was like very, very intimate. It was like most of the time after that first time I did, it would just be me. I'd come home from school, smoke like in the woods, and just like ride my bike around and just have a grand old time. But yeah, anyway, so like over time, that just the relationship with it got weird, and I don't
Yeah.
know. Um that kid that I told you about, that he and some other kids started getting into like opiates and cocaine and stuff, and I don't know. They kind of went down, like they got into heroin I think in high school, which was like before I ever did.
Yeah.
And it
Wow.
was anyway that so like long story short, that kid that I was telling you about ended up dying. He actually committed suicide, and it kind of it shook me up, and I wasn't willing to admit it. And I don't know. And then afterwards, I got into a car accident because I was, drinking and just feeling real low about that. And I remember I woke up in the hospital after my accident with an IV of morphine.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to, I know that feeling. Like when I woke up, I could feel there was something different, and it was just so soothing, and it took away all the bad shit that was in my mind
Yeah.
very effectively in that way.
Wow. So was that basically like as soon as you woke up and you had that experience, was that kind of the start of it for you? Like you were like, man, this is my jam now.
Yeah, I mean, it was subconsciously. I didn't immediately start going to opiates. It took a couple months afterwards. A few months later, I was so like after high school, a lot of my friends went off to college, and the only one or two that didn't were still here, and they were using heroin already. This was
Hmm.
before I got into heroin, but I was getting a lot of pain pills from the doctor because of my broken neck, and um, I was like selling them because I didn't know what else to do with them. But then one point I tried them, and I was like, "Yep, I'm getting that feeling again, that same feeling that I got from the IV morphine in the hospital." And it wasn't long after that that I saw my friend shoot up heroin for the first time, and I saw the look on his face, and I was just like, because I was so lost, man. I was so lost. I was just like, yeah, that's what I want.
Yeah.
It it wasn't such a conscious decision. Looking back on it, it seems more conscious than it was in the moment. So yeah, I just got into heroin, shooting heroin. I was just like never really had a thing against needles because I don't know, I just never had that stigma
Mhm.
as some do.
Yeah. And so how long did that last? Was that a consistent run for you, or were you on and off for a while, or how did it go from there?
Yeah. For the first few years it was on and off. It was most actually for the first like year it was once a week. And I think it's important to talk about like I would do the heroin not necessarily because I want to do heroin. It's because the heroin provided me with something. And that's what I think it's important to talk about. It's like the heroin provided me with perspective, and it provided me with relief. Um, and so, and I, at first I didn't need it every day because, that's nobody goes into heroin like day one and just does it all the time. It's a progressive disease. Right. And so, yeah, at first I was only doing it like once a week, and then over the next 2-3 years, it got a little worse, and I would go on binges and then go off for a few days. But towards the last 3 years, so it was like a 10-year process. When I was 18 to when I was 28, or just before I was 28, so about 10 years. And the last 3 years of that, I mean, I don't know if you've heard about how addictions, they kind of get exponentially worse over time. So it's not like a linear thing. It's not like you start
Yeah.
It's real bad here, and it's just gonna get, yeah, it gets like, it's not just like getting a little
Yes.
bit worse, it's getting like much, 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 much
It
worse
gets
because,
compounded, right? I mean, the
yeah,
worse it gets, the worse it gets. Faster
yeah.
it gets worse or whatever, right? So yeah, so I've heard of that. So is that the experience with all substances, do you think, or is that specific to opiates, or that's just addiction in general? It's an
I
exponential growth curve.
I would I'm not like entirely sure, but I would make the claim that it's with all substances.
Yeah.
I know with alcohol, and I know with, you know, yeah, I think that's just like the nature of humans having addictions to substances.
Hmm.
A
You
lot of
think?
time,
Oh,
sorry.
sorry. Go ahead.
I think I was gonna say a lot of times people don't want to admit that they have addictions to certain things,
Hmm.
which I absolutely didn't want to do. But
Yeah. Do you think it has to do with the fact that we build tolerances? We're always adapting to whatever we're consuming. So if you're taking, like for you, you started once a week for the first few whatever months, it was fine, but then eventually you needed more because the
mhm,
once a week wasn't really doing it because you build a tolerance, right?
100%.
Yeah, that's
It's
and it just
it
necessitates more, taking more and more to get the same effect, right?
Yeah, it's a physical and a psychological tolerance. I think almost every drug has that in some way. Obviously, heroin has more of a physical tolerance than than most substances, but I think on some level, every substance that we take has a physiological and a psychological effect on us.
Yeah, I would agree based on my own experiences, anyways. But
Yeah.
so before we continue, I got to ask you. I mean, your brother's not here, obviously, but where was he in this during this 10-year span, or even shortly before when your friend committed suicide and you were starting to go through stuff? Is he your older brother or younger brother?
So he's my younger brother, the one that I do the podcast with.
Yeah.
I have an older brother and older I have a older brother who's the oldest, and an older sister who's a little bit younger than him, and
Hmm.
then me and my younger brother. And it would be great to have him speak about this because, he is more articulate about it than I am for like what he was going through. But I think he just kind of like what we talk about in one podcast actually is like he really didn't like that I was, doing drugs and whatnot, because he was younger than me, right? So people would come up to him and be like,
Mm,
oh my God, your brother did this, and he smokes weed, and he did that, and he's doing all these things. And my brother Ryan's just like, first of all, I don't want to know. And second of all, you're saying that to influence me in a way.
mhm.
You're trying to make me feel a certain way about it. Um,
Yeah. Well, and I'd love to get him, either with you or by himself at some point. But I was just curious in general from your point of view where he was at on, during this time, just because I know you guys are doing the podcast together. So
I can't imagine what it was like for him to see me go through all of that stuff, and also the fact that I was putting in a way like him and everyone through it. Um, what we've come to an understanding on is it wasn't necessarily my fault and my bad doing, but it was a collective. And for me, that really helped me get some understanding of it. Because I agree, I don't think an addict is a standalone, like all of the issues fall on the addict. I think that's what I was perpetuating, though. I think with the drugs, I was kind of taking the I was trying to take the pressure off the rest of the family and put it all on me. Like, I'm the
mhm.
black sheep, I'm the one with the issue. Don't do as I do.
Yeah.
But he's since since getting clean and having this mystical experience, I would say that I had, he said that he said, like, yeah, it's not all your issue, it's a collective issue. You know it's not one person's issue. It's like, you know what I mean? Like, that's just like how humans are. We're so connected.
Yeah.
If one person's falling, and maybe it's not just the person, maybe there's a bigger issue. And yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, nothing exists in a vacuum, right? I mean, everything is a connection to something else, and not only to other human beings, but think about all the different systems we've put in place, these artificial systems like economies and governments and laws. And man, addiction does not emerge in a vacuum. It is a symptom of many different factors, as you say. And it's not just people. I mean, there are factors that are economic and all these different things, right? Cultural, whatever.
Hmm. Hmm.
Are you
Hmm.
familiar with a gentleman named Gabor Mate?
Absolutely. I love a lot of his stuff
Good.
personally.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you at the very beginning, and then you kind of almost answered it, but I was going to ask you about the connection between trauma and addiction, and whether
Hmm.
there was some kind of trauma that may have, caused you to go. And then you talked about your friend, taking his life. So I was like, okay, there, that's a great example right there of trauma creating this addiction, right?
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you brought that up because that's been a huge topic on my mind and of conversation with people this year is the idea that trauma is kind of at the base of all mental illness. Now, I'm not claiming that, but I mean I'm saying that I personally believe that it may very well be the case. I want to be careful about how I like use my words, I don't want to make a claim and be like somebody be like this guy, but I do believe that trauma because trauma, going through a traumatic experience, it feels as though you're alone and you're fighting whatever is going on. It's such a personal, intimate experience, and it's
Mm.
so hard to let go of it because it happened. It's real, It's like it actually you had to go through it. It's
Yeah.
um so like when after my best friend killed himself, um I told myself, well, okay, so let me just break it down real quick. What happened? I saw him do drugs, like I saw him shoot up drugs like a week before. And I didn't realize it at the time. See, this is another thing I talk about on my podcast. My inaction, my inability to act is really my downfall. It was my downfall because instead of being like, "Oh, it's okay," I should have been like, "Okay, you shouldn't be doing." I should have stepped in. Maybe it would have helped, maybe not. But looking back on it, it seems so clear. But in the moment, I didn't know what I was experiencing. I'd never seen anybody shoot up. I'd only heard about that, and I didn't even know what that meant really. Like, I was just so ignorant to all that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so a week later, I'm in San Francisco, California. He's still up here in Vermont, and I'm with my high school girlfriend down there, and she gets a phone call and just starts bawling and just crying like hysterically. And we're in Golden Gate Park, and I'm just like, "What's going on?" And she tells me, and I shit you not, my response was, "Okay, let's go get some food." Like I just didn't know how to respond to it. I didn't want to accept it, obviously, but I just anyway, what I'm getting at is I didn't really cry about that for like I don't think I cried about it, like legitimately felt it and cried about it for like 3 years.
Mhm.
And just crying about it wasn't enough. Because I still told myself that it didn't affect me.
Hmm.
I mean, I literally believed that his death wasn't affecting me. Like that's what I would tell myself. Because I wasn't strong enough to accept that it was a very traumatic thing that happened.
Yeah, I can imagine, man. I mean, and again, not to probe too much into this because obviously it's, sensitive subject, but do you feel like like you just mentioned, your inaction? Do you feel that you bear some responsibility in some way for that? Is there some guilt in there as well? Because, that would also be a compounding factor, right?
Definitely. Um, yeah. So, like I said, like told myself it wasn't affecting me, and I also told myself that I didn't feel guilty about it. But
Hmm.
that was complete bullcrap. Um, and in the episode that we talk about it, I think it's actually called like guilt or shame of our past or something. And I don't remember exactly what the episode's called, but I think yeah, I basically talk about like how guilty and shameful that I have felt this entire time without realizing it.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and the drugs, I mean, are just another way, again, in my experience, to cope with those types of feelings, right? You just annihilate yourself, and then you're not ashamed or guilty, or, you don't got to deal with it anymore for a little while.
and I'll say this not to I'll just say, heroin is is in my life and in a lot of people's life the most effective tool at doing that.
Hmm.
There are other tools, we could even break it down to like sugar. Like sugar and food are extremely, extremely good tools at doing that. But um, heroin was just it's almost like it was procured for that. Like I
Hmm.
think it was refined like heroin's such a refined opium. I think humans just realized like how strong it was and just refine it over years. And just like, I think it was made for that.
Yeah. Pain, physical, emotional, psychological, it just numbs it all out, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
But that only lasts for so long. And so eventually you have to come to grips with whatever it is that you're trying to numb out. And so
Mhm.
how did that progress for you in the last, year and a half? How did you come to this place where you are now, where you're having these conversations and coming to
Right.
grips with these things that you've kind of repressed for years and kind of tried to numb yourself of?
Right. That's a great question. I it's kind of it's, if I want to be humble, but in my honest opinion, it's a 100% miracle. It's a
Mhm.
100% miraculous thing that happened. And things can change in the future, so I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but even so far, just looking back on the past year, I posted a video of myself a couple weeks ago of my brother and I reacting to videos of myself when I was still on methadone. So, anyway, yeah, so I was using heroin and methadone. I've been using methadone for the past 7 years, and heroin, prescribed to me,
Yeah.
and heroin for 10 years. So, like I said, the last 3 years of my drug addiction were the worst. It was just so bad. And so I was using, I've said it like this because it's true, but it may be even longer than 6 months. But I was using pretty much daily for 6 months, the methadone every morning and the heroin.
Wow.
There may have been like a day here and there that I didn't use, but it's pretty consistent, pretty much every day. So, and I remember asking myself, like, a week before I got clean, I was like truly thinking in my head, like, do I think I'm ever going to get clean off of methadone and heroin? And there's always that hope. There's always like, yeah, there's but it's the hope was just the longer my addiction went on, the hope went further and further down. And that's, I think, what made it compound so much. Another factor that made it compound, the
Mhm.
addiction, like when you lose hope, it just gets so much worse.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking to myself, and I was like, honestly, I, I don't think I'm going to get off methadone. And that's like a really difficult thing to say to myself, say to oneself, to really feel that. And so a week, this is about a week before I get clean. And anyway, so I'm kind of talking a lot, but
It's all good, man. I want to hear this.
okay, thank you. So my brother Ryan had a psilocybin experience about 3 years ago that he's changed his life so much. He was never into like hard drugs. He talks about he was prescribed Adderall and how he had an addiction to that, and he would drink and party a lot, but he doesn't do any of that stuff anymore. He's completely changed, and I saw that. But so he was trying to talk to me about ayahuasca. He says ayahuasca is used for addiction purposes to get people off of their addictions. And it's like, so he was talking to me about that for a couple months before I actually took it,
Mhm.
here and there. He was, oh, you want to do it? You want to do it? I pushed it off as long as I could. And yeah, ayahuasca. I didn't go to the jungle either. I didn't go to a retreat like most people do, and I have nothing against that. I don't think I would have done that. I think I would have been way too scared to do that.
Mhm.
Um, anyway, so it was like it was in the state that I live in that I took it. And so anyway, so like he had been suggesting I do it for a few months, or just like at least showing it as a possibility. So the intention was already like in my mind from the get, from when he first mentioned it. So my intention going into taking this ayahuasca, I was using heroin every single day and methadone. And my intention in this ayahuasca, I wrote 3 things down, one of which was, show me who I've become. Another one was return me to like the love that's inside of me. So just like some corny things, but like they they were
Just setting intention, right?
yeah, just setting intention.
Yeah.
There was another intention I don't remember, but basically, yeah, it's basically like, let's get some introspection on who I have become and how and just, yeah. So anyway, so I have the ayahuasca experience. So I take it and it doesn't really work for the first like 2 hours, which is surprising. I'm with my brother.
Is it just the two of you, or did you have somebody there that like a shaman or somebody guiding you along?
I didn't have a shaman.
Ryan was your shaman.
Ryan basically was, he knew me best,
Yeah.
and so I think it was right for the time. Um, yeah, I don't know. So anyway, so I take the drink, and 2 hours pass, and I'm not feeling anything. So he's like, "All right, I guess it's not working," and walks out of the room. And as soon as he walks out of the room, it hits me. I'm like, "Oh yeah, I'm feeling something," and like just looking around, like, oh, okay. Um, but it was like uh, one of the most beautiful experiences, because it was actually, I get this, it's gonna sound weird, but it was actually Thanksgiving Day. It wasn't planned this way at all, I promise.
Who cares? It's a good day to do
There,
it. Any as good a day as any, as far as I'm concerned.
exactly, especially when someone has a heroin addiction. Like,
Yeah, man.
Thanksgiving meant nothing to me then. So,
Right.
um, yeah. So I'm looking at my arms. I've got like, needle marks, and my hair. I don't know if there's a picture floating out there, but my hair's real big and my beard is massive, and I'm just like, I don't want to go downstairs to eat dinner with my family. But then right when I said that, when the ayahuasca was kicking in, it just completely changed that whole, I don't know, man. It's hard to explain, but it gave me this feeling of everything's okay. Just surrender to the moment and just be,
Mm.
which is like, I think the hardest thing for humans to do. Like in my life, it was the hardest thing to do. And it still is really hard to do in a lot of ways. Because by doing that, we're giving up, we're kind of pushing our anxiety away, or at least trying to. By living in the moment, we have to push away whatever we're thinking of the past and what the future could be, and
Hmm.
just be. It's really a paradoxical thing for humans, because we have the ability to think of the past and the future, and
And that's useful. It's a useful ability,
absolutely.
but it has to
uh,
be moderated and controlled, or else it runs your life, right? You spend your whole time living in the past or worrying about the future.
yeah, which is essentially what I was doing when I was using heroin. It was like, get me out of the moment, let me think about other things.
Yeah, distraction. Yeah,
Distraction, disconnection, distraction, yeah.
yeah.
So the thing about the ayahuasca was, it allowed me, like, my anxiety to dissipate and just kind of be, and be okay. There was something very empowering about the feeling that I was feeling while I was on the ayahuasca. um it was it was a very like transcendental experience, maybe. Anyway, I just accepted what was, walked downstairs. I didn't eat dinner. I was with my family. They were all eating dinner. And holidays at my house are just absurd, just crazy, like fighting all the time. It's weird. You think holidays would be the opposite, but
I don't
um,
think the average people, I think, are in the same boat as you. Most people seem to complain about their family gatherings, you know?
right. And it was like that, except for this time it wasn't. It was extremely calm, and my brother had just had his baby, was just born like 2 days prior.
Wow.
So a lot of things going on, in our family, but it was, one of the best Thanksgivings in a way, that we've had, because it was just so calm and serene, and everyone was getting along.
So
Um,
hang on one sec. You you took ayahuasca. It kicked in about 2 hours later, and that's when you decided to go downstairs for Thanksgiving dinner with your family.
well, that's when they were having dinner, and I,
God bless you, man. I would have been hiding somewhere. I would have been running through the woods. But I've never done ayahuasca, so I don't know. Maybe I would have been the same as you. But that seems like a very interesting sort of reaction. Like, instead of huddling in and just being introspective and having the experience, you're like out there with people, fully exposed.
yeah, definitely. It was, like I said, it wasn't planned. I didn't plan it like, I'm going to take the ayahuasca and then come down. Um, but there was just something about it. It was almost like a calling. It was like the ayahuasca is telling you everything's okay. Like, not just telling me, but the thing about psychedelics that I think are so important, and I don't know if we're talking about enough, is it's not only that you're able to conceptualize, but you're actually feeling. Like I was actually feeling this sense of everything's okay, this
Hmm.
serenity. Um, Instead of like you can conceptualize it. No, I was actually like really feeling it.
Yeah, it's
And
a fact. It's not like I think I'm okay. It's like no, no, you feel it. You know that
yeah,
you're okay, right? It's yeah, it's a tricky one to explain to people, but there's a big difference between like what you say, conceptual knowledge and experiential knowledge. Like when you experience the truth of something, it doesn't matter what you think. It's all gone now. You know it, right? And so was it similar to that?
absolutely. And I think that's when we're talking about this, I just want to make the distinction real quick because I think it's so important to do. And I always want to when I'm talking about psychedelics, that they're so powerful for that reason,
Hmm.
because we're convicted of them, because we're experiencing them, we're feeling them. But that can go one of two ways. And that's what we talk about a lot, is that can be a very like I'm extremely lucky. I have like the best support around me. So I have to give the credit where credit's due. It's not my own doing. It's really the the people that I'm surrounded by that are so like my brother and some other in my family and some other people. But what I'm saying is if you have a psychedelic experience and you're influenced by maybe not so good of people, that can be like that's why it's so important to set and setting,
Hmm.
because you can be influenced in such a way that whatever you experience, you're all of a sudden convinced is a real thing. And
Oh
that
yeah.
can be really, really, as you've seen, I'm sure, like can be really detrimental. I mean, there's actually like cases of, I think even like the CIA, for example, like use LSD for like mind control. And I think
Yeah.
like that's kind of what like Charles Manson was into. Like it's just like it can go one of two ways. And it's always important to say that when, in my opinion, when I'm talking about psychedelics, because I don't want to say that psychedelics are a cure, because
Mm.
they're not. If any, my experience was just that, an experience that was profound, and I would even say mystical. I'm not sure I know exactly what that means, but it was a divine like experience.
Yeah.
But then you have to ask yourself, what does that mean? It's only going to be that way if I continue what I'm doing.
Absolutely. You got to
If I
integrate the experience, right?
Exactly, if I were to go back to drugs, then it wouldn't have been all of that meaning would be lost, and
Yeah, potentially. Yeah.
potentially, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a very wise thing of you to say. And I had another guest on like maybe a couple months ago, who's he basically guides people on psychedelic experiences and has been for a number of years. He used to do ayahuasca ceremonies for people, and now he's moved on to a different modality. But he always says the exact same thing. He says psychedelics are a tool. That's it.
Good.
You can use a hammer to build a house. You can use a hammer to bash somebody in the head. You can use, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like
Right.
how you use the tool is what makes the difference. It's not the tool itself.
Yeah, like you said, there are tools. So yeah, so that's and like what do we, the integration would be like, what do we do to continue to build without having to go back and take the psychedelic again?
That's
Because
right.
I haven't like I personally, I took the ayahuasca twice, but they were within a month of each other, and I haven't done it since.
Mhm.
And I'm not going to say I'm not going to do it again, but I don't feel a calling to do it right now.
Right. Yeah. I feel like everybody that I know who's ever done it kind of has the same view of it. It's like once you get the message, hang up the phone kind of thing, right? You don't have to keep calling. Like, so don't keep taking it because you got what you needed from it. But yeah, following your intuition with that, I think is again also wise because your body and your mind and will tell you if you need to do it again. There's no need to force yourself into it.
Yeah, 100%.
So the first ayahuasca ceremony, or well, it's not a ceremony, but the first time you took it, Thanksgiving. And so did you have a plan to integrate, or did you have a way to integrate that experience? Was your brother there to help you? How did it go afterwards?
Oh, that's great. That's such a good question, because it I didn't have an integration tool. I didn't at all. The only integration I had was talking to my brother and my parents. Like they were at wit's end when I was using. They were like, "We're gonna try anything." So yeah, try the ayahuasca. But they didn't. They don't like. They're my dad's trained as a psychiatrist. My mom's trained as a psychiatric nurse. So they don't know anything about psychedelics really.
Which is
I mean,
surprising.
yeah, it is absolutely. But like they've learned a lot over the year. They've kind of been forced to, and they're very understanding and they want to learn more. But in the moment, they didn't really know. So the only person that I was really close to me that had a psychedelic experience was my younger brother, Ryan.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't. And it's important to say after the ayahuasca, I was, if I was seen by a doctor, I would be very likely considered hypomanic.
Sorry, hypomanic. What does that mean?
Right. Like mania,
Oh, okay.
like a short stint of mania.
After the experience.
Yeah. When I was still on the methadone,
Right.
I had super, super high energy and I was, super, hold on. I got to fix my mic.
No worries, man.
Sorry. Yeah. So I was super convicted of, or I was just like super energetic and I was so sure of myself, like overconfident, like pushing the people that support me, my loved ones, away because I had so much energy, even though I was completely like convinced of everything that I thought I knew, which is really just arrogance and it's just all this stuff that I wasn't willing to accept. So yes, integration is number one when it comes to it. If you ever get a chance, that video where my brother and I watch of myself when I was on methadone, I mean, you'll get one look at what I was like, the video, and you'll be like, yeah, I understand 100%. It's so easy to see.
Because
I was just,
that was after your experience, after the psychedelics.
it was after the ayahuasca, but I was still on the methadone.
Oh, I see. So the mania was there.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
And you'll see it I'll send you a link to the video, but one look and you'll be like, yeah, I see what he's saying.
Yep. Yeah. And you know what? Like, interestingly enough, like you say you had a mystical experience and you might not, whatever that means. Right. I think it's normal after those types of breakthrough experiences to have a sustained period of euphoria after. I mean,
oh yeah,
if you read the accounts of mystics from all ages, that's a symptom, and it doesn't last forever. But if you don't know what you're experiencing, obviously it could be alarming, right? I mean, I had a similar experience, and it was like for 3 months after I wouldn't describe myself as manic, but I was euphoric every day. It was like, holy shit, when is this going to stop? So yeah, I think it's probably normal to some extent.
Yeah, I would agree. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah.
But maybe the methadone had something to do with it as well. I have no idea. I'm not a doctor, obviously.
So let me tell you about that whole like story of like getting off the methadone. So I had this experience, right? Is the mic good right now?
Oh yeah, you're good. You've been good the whole time, my friend.
All right, cool. Yeah. So I had this ayahuasca experience and I stopped using heroin overnight. Literally, I didn't touch it again, which was weird because, like I said, I was using it every day, even with the methadone. But now I'm just on the methadone, right?
Right.
Not using the heroin, but I'm on a high dose of methadone, 120 milligrams, in fact, which is a significant dose.
Can I ask you, does methadone, I have a buddy who was in prison for a while, so he's got some experience with methadone and guys inside taking it. And he the doctors say that it doesn't make you high, right? But he swears, he's like, I've seen guys take it and puke it up so that another guy can take it. Like, if that doesn't get you high, then what, so does the methadone actually alter your consciousness, or are you kind of the same, like almost sober with the methadone?
Not even close. Well, you said two things. You said, does it make you high? And then you said, does it alter your state of consciousness? I would say 1000% it alters your state of consciousness. Does it get you high? I would say even yes to that. Maybe we're not aware of it in the moment. I wasn't aware. I wasn't like, oh, I'm getting high on methadone, but from an external point of view, 100%.
Wow. That's interesting.
Yeah. And it is important. It is interesting that the doctors tell you it's not going to get you high. It's just going to be maintain you. But that's where I have my qualms with that, is like, it's a profitable business, right?
Of course.
My brother. Yeah.
It's all good, brother. I got three kids. I know what I'm totally comfortable with crying babies. If anything,
Super.
bring the baby over when we stop recording so I can say hi.
Absolutely. I'd
My
love to.
youngest is almost 5 now, so he's not a baby anymore. He's a big boy, but
Oh boy.
love the kids.
That's awesome. Good to hear.
Yeah, man. I like the sound of kids. I'm used to it. So they're out of the house right now. It's so quiet. So as soon as the baby started, I was like, perfect.
It's actually interesting. Nobody in our family has any kids except for my youngest brother, Ryan. Who, but
Yeah.
yeah, man, super cool. But yeah, so I just think it's like when doctors say, "Oh, you're not going to get high from this." It's like, were you told it was your? Because I'm not faulting doctors. I'm not saying doctors are bad people or
Mhm.
anything at all, but like that. But I think their training is to understand things a certain way. They're trained to understand that methadone won't get you high.
Yeah. Well, and we can't speak of all doctors, but I think there's
Right.
enough evidence to show that doctors will prescribe. Like, there's an opiate crisis because of, this one company was paying doctors to overprescribe it. So
Yeah.
some doctors probably aren't the most ethical, but, we can't say that all doctors are like that.
Right. I mean, my dad's a doctor,
Exactly. Right.
so
I'm sure he's a good dude.
yeah, he's great. He's more than I could ever ask for, really. So,
Oh, that's a
but
blessing, man. So the methadone, you were on a high dose of methadone, and for the record, in your opinion, yes, it does make you high. Good to know. I can agree with my friend now. But anyways, how did you manage to wean yourself off of that?
right, that's yeah. So I had the ayahuasca experience in November, and then I didn't use heroin again. But what I wanted to do was get off the methadone. So I went from 120 milligrams over the about 3 months. I think I started on 100, started going down in like February. So it was a couple months after I was still on the high dose of methadone, but I was wired, and maybe the methadone played a role in the energy and all that. Um, but then I was like, all right, it's time to get off of it. So I meet with the doctor. I'm like, I want to get off methadone. He's like, no, basically like, no, like that's not, I can't do that. The chances of you surviving are extremely low. Either he said like 95% of people that try to get off methadone get back on methadone.
Hmm.
Like 2.5% end up overdosing and dying. And then there's like 2.5% of them that actually get clean.
Yeah.
So he was basically like, no, it's not gonna. But I was like, well, okay, then I'll only drink half my dose. Basically, I was going back and forth with him, kind of like, this is what's going to happen. And eventually he was like, okay, all right, fine. Like, we'll do that. So I went from 120 milligrams down to 1 milligram in about 3 months, which is extremely, extremely fast.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Yeah. The doctor said like normally that would be like a 1 to 2 year taper,
Right.
120 milligrams. But I was convinced I wanted to get off of it, and I thought I would. So I tried, and it didn't work. I got down to 1 milligram, and I had withdrawal, physically, psychologically withdrawing, and it was just unbearable. And I didn't. And the thing about withdrawal of opiates, it feels like it's never going to end,
Hmm.
even though you're sure at some point it will. It just feels like it never will. So I ended up using again.
Hmm.
So this is about in April that I'm down to 1 milligram. I start using again, and I'm using for like 2 to 3 weeks, and I overdosed two times,
Oh, wow.
like both times, like yeah, had to be Narcans, the opiate reversal.
Yep.
And so luckily, so that's not a great thing, but there is some good to come of it, because after the second time I overdosed, I was around, I was kind of at home at that point. I was with family, and um, later that day, after I come out of the overdose experience, which was extremely brutal, but when I come out of it, I'm like, all right, I need to go to rehab. And it was really the first time that I ever said it myself, like, I need to go. Usually I've been to rehab a few times before, but it was never my idea.
Hmm.
And so I call rehab that day, and I get into one like 2 days later. So I just have to wait it out like 2-3 days, and every single day, every moment I wanted to use.
Mm.
And yeah, I didn't use, thankfully, but I really wanted to. And I went into rehab and I went for 7 days. And when I went in, I was on 15 milligrams of methadone. And by the seventh day, or by the first day I went, I didn't take it. And by 7 days later, I was off of it and starting to feel better, actually.
Wow.
It's still a long process. I came home and it was probably like a month and a half to 2 months when I was really feeling like, okay, I feel much better now. But
Mhm.
after the fifth, sixth day, it started to feel a little better.
Nice. And
Um,
that's got to build your hope, right? You talked about that earlier, losing hope. Now this is the reverse now because you're feeling better and you're getting off of it, and you're moving in the right direction. So I imagine that hope probably motivates you to keep going, right?
yeah, definitely. Um, I also want to say, like, I think it's important to say, because we talked a little bit about integration. So what my brother and I do is we do our own kind of integration thing, our own therapy like thing. We call it a ritual because
Hmm.
it is a ritual. And what we do is we go into the woods every Sunday. I mean, like rain or shine, every Sunday. It didn't start like this. It started organically, but like it's been 9 months we've been doing this.
Yeah.
And um, what we do is we go into the woods and we do a little ritual, and we stay silent and try to like focus on our own fear, anxieties, depression, like basically like our fears that push us to do stupid things. And there's a very cathartic um, a very cathartic release that happens in that like practice. And I just want to say, like, the first day we decided to do this, um, the first day we did this, it was nothing like it is today. We were basically just a couple of guys just going out in the woods and doing this. We smoke weed, but I don't smoke weed, and I never used to smoke weed. I only smoke weed in that setting, which
Oh,
is
wow. Interesting.
as
Good
yeah,
way
I
to do
don't.
it. So let me ask you about weed real quick because I had a similar experience to you in terms of like my opinion of it as a young person, as a teenager. Like I tried it no, I did it a few times or whatever, but I never liked it, and I always kind of had like a low opinion of it. And then I think I was probably 27, maybe 28, and I had a buddy who was just like every day lighting up, and eventually I was just like, all right, I'll do it with him or whatever, and then playing board games with friends, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh shit, this is not like I remember it. Like, has it changed for you as an adult versus doing it as a 13, 14-year-old?
For me, yeah, I definitely. See, the thing with weed, I'm super sensitive to it, like super, super sensitive. So whenever I would do it in the past, especially like when I was during my active addiction years, my 10 years, immediately regret it
Mm.
because I'd be like, this is what I'm trying to escape. I don't want my fears to be swirling in front of my
Yeah.
face.
All these uncomfortable thoughts popping into your head.
Yeah. Um, so it's like I stayed away from it during my drug using days. But what I've realized is it can be, with the right intention and the right um, setting, can be used to be extremely effective at getting into deeper fear and being more introspective. I mean, like, I could tell you the things that have changed in my life since doing this, and it to me, it's just like the ayahuasca was a catalyst to get me to here, but what I do now is way more, like way stronger, way more. There's way more routine, which is good because I can do it every week. I don't have to do psychedelics every week.
That's right.
Smoking weed once a week, it's like okay, like it's a couple hours where I'm high a little. It's
Yep.
nothing like I wouldn't take a psychedelic every week, even
Right.
unless
Yeah.
at all. But yeah, so I think cannabis can be used as a super sacred plant medicine
Yeah.
in the right setting. And but so what happened was, like, I think so the first time we did this, it was a Sunday, and we come away like I said one thing. I remember after smoking, we stay quiet as long as possible. And then I said something because I'm really bad about staying quiet when I'm high. I'm just, all my fears are just swirling.
Sure. Yeah.
And so I said something about like childhood that was really profound. And anyways, it was just something about like religion or something that like I didn't really think about beforehand, or it was like in my subconscious. And so like we all had this experience. We all walked away thinking, all right, this is really powerful. But the second week we did it was way more than I asked for. It was just way stronger. And I was just kind of like catatonic in a way. I was just like, I smoked, and I was just, and my brother and my friend Tom, who does it with us, they were looking at me like, you okay? Like, cause you could just see, I was like struck by like some fear or something. And that's actually, I overdosed after that.
Oh, I see. Interesting.
So it's important to say is like, I think like doing this and seeing the potential of it pushed me into an overdose, a death like thing, because I knew how powerful it could be, but I was so scared.
Right.
Luckily, it was like the next day afterwards that I overdosed. Luckily, I got into rehab. I got off the methadone. It's now been 9 months, and every time I'm in that setting, it's I don't know. It's like the most cathartic, gratitude filled like feeling ever, and it really, it's really special to me.
That's amazing, man. Some people go to church every Sunday. You go into the woods with your buddy and your brother, and you guys meditate and have deep spiritual experiences, man. That's the way it fucking should be. That's amazing.
And it is, man.
Good for
And
you.
thank you so much. And I love the idea of church. Like I think it's so cool, the communion,
Yeah.
the just everyone getting together for the same purpose. So friggin' cool, man. I just with like religious indoctrination, that type of stuff, I never could really get behind. But I love the idea of people coming together for one goal.
Sure. Yeah.
At one time during the week,
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that's what you guys are doing in a way. It's just a smaller group. And again, you're not in a building and you're not listening to some preacher or priest or whatever. You guys are your own priests, right? I mean, you guys have taken this into your own hands. And I think that's far more valuable and empowering.
Thanks, man. Yeah. Well, a couple things that we said from the get-go is, and which really helped me when I was using drugs, because I was still using, obviously, when I started doing this.
Yeah.
My brother said, I am going to accept you for everything, no matter what. Like, you can use heroin and it doesn't matter. I'm still going to accept you, which was really, that's like one thing, that we accept each other no matter what. We also, number two, we see each other's opinions and other people's, what other people say as equal of value to our own. Like, everybody is just as equal as the next. There's probably a couple other things, but you get the point.
Yeah, man, you guys have a covenant. You guys have like a, set of ideas or rules that you guys all agree to follow, not because it's some dude telling you or because you guys agree to, right? Yeah, that's very beautiful, man. I love it. Wow. So 9 months you have been completely clean, no methadone, nothing else. Well, I mean, I don't consider cannabis, you're not dirty for doing cannabis, like,
yeah,
especially when you use it the way you use it, which is, in a ritualistic and medicinal way, right? I mean, that's great.
Yeah, exactly. I don't say, when people are like, oh, are you like, people, first of all, they don't ask me, are you clean or not? But if someone were to, I would never be like, oh yeah, I'm clean. I would just be like, well, I would be like, I'm clean from opiates, and those were my number one struggle. And like, fuck yeah, I'm clean from them. So sorry for swearing.
Oh, don't, you swear all you want, man. This is not for kids, despite the crying baby in the background. Yeah, no, I mean, like what you said earlier about people not wanting to admit their addictions and stuff, it's funny because I always tell people everybody's addicted. There's not a single person that doesn't have an addiction. You're addicted to, at the very least, you're addicted to oxygen, my friend.
Yeah.
You're addicted to life and to living, right? Otherwise, you just fucking let yourself go. But
And
beyond that, I think, caffeine, sugar, gambling, sex, whatever, it doesn't have to be a substance. We are all addicted. We're all creatures of addiction in some way or another.
absolutely. It kind of took me getting clean from my own addiction, my own heroin addiction, to realize that every single person has an addiction.
They're not all bad, maybe, as long as,
No.
again, if you have a handle on it, then you're doing okay. I mean, because everybody's
Yeah.
got them. So all you can do is try to find the ones that are not destroying your life, and invest in those ones, and be careful, and make sure you're keeping yourself honest, right? Like self auditing. I do this frequently because I consume cannabis, and it's like I always am like, am I consuming more than I normally like? Is it starting to do this? This exponential growth curve. Maybe it's time
Hmm.
for some time off, right? Take a break, but because it's a slippery slope, right? Anything is.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I also think it's important to say, like, one thing that I don't know if it was my fear of death or my fear of life or both, but I think that's what pushed me into like my overdose and my using of heroin. Was I just wasn't, I didn't have the capacity to understand life as I would have liked. Like, where I have now, it's like, it's okay. I don't need to do anything. I can just kind of like sit here and it's okay.
Yeah.
Just a peace of mind, and it's a wild story, man.
Dude, it's a great story. I love it, man. And I think a lot of people still don't realize that psychedelics can be used to treat addiction. So, I mean,
Mm.
just right off the bat, that's a noteworthy, revelation in this conversation. The fact that you can use psychedelics as a tool to help you overcome addiction, because that was the catalyst, as you said. Not to take away any of the credit that is deserved by yourself and your family for supporting you, but I mean, for you specifically, because you got to do the work. You're the one who's doing the work, and it's great that you're getting
Ex-
supported, right? But it seems like
exactly.
that psychedelic experience gave you the opening you needed to do the
Mm.
work that you're doing now, to now stay sober off of opiates.
Yeah, and I'll say this, and I think I'll always say this because I really feel it to be true. Is I don't think there was anything else in this world that could have catalyzed me to, or gave me the perspective that the ayahuasca was able to. I I'd heard what I'd become from other people my whole life. That didn't help. It just didn't. But when I
Hmm.
felt it, and I could really somehow just put myself in like a different perspective. I don't know how to explain it, but it was a feeling of like, and it was just like whoa. It's so hard to explain, but basically, it got me in touch with like my kid again, and it was like, what have I become? What am I doing?
Yeah.
Just makes you look at everything. And the other thing about it is the feeling of it, the feeling of everything's okay. And that's what the integration is so key. Is like, how do you bring that out for as long as possible? And
Keep it front of mind, right?
yeah. And
Because
it's not
it's,
it's not it's not like the ayahuasca alone that gives you that. It's really our own mind. It was the ayahuasca that allowed me to.
yeah, absolutely, man. The word psychedelic, the root words, right? Psychedelia, it basically means to make your psyche revealed. So everything that you experience, all those breakthroughs, and even the like visual hallucinations, it's all coming from inside you. Psychedelics just unlock this part of you that is completely sealed off during normal times. It dissolves the barriers. Poof, it all comes up to the surface. And so again, it's a tool. It doesn't give you anything you don't already have. And so that feeling that you're okay,
Hmm.
you had that. It just was totally buried under a lot of shit. And the ayahuasca just took that shit and went whoosh, cleared the table, baby. Here you are.
Yeah, exactly. And I consider it a magical thing because, like, no matter how much therapy I did 10 years of therapy when I was using, none of it helped. And yeah, I was using, so that may have been part of it. But all of a sudden I have this experience, and now I've been doing therapy, for like a year or so, and I've gotten more out in this year than I have in the past 10 years.
Yeah. You're in the right state of mind to engage with it and to benefit from it, right?
Yeah. And I think I'm getting better as time goes on. It's not, it's a therapy is a practice too.
Yeah. Wow. Very cool, man. We're
Yeah.
coming up on an hour, and I mean, I could do this for a long time. Do you have any parting words of wisdom, any advice that you'd like to give out there as kind of a farewell gift to the audience, anything that you want to share?
Um, I mean, I'd like to say, if anyone has any questions, to reach out to me. And my brother, we're gonna keep doing what we're doing, and we have a little YouTube show called Candid Conversations where we just kind of sit in front of and kind of do what we're doing right now, just talk and be open and honest about whatever we want to talk about. Um, but yeah, if anyone's struggling with addiction, I that's so hard for me. I don't like to talk on that because can't put myself in other people's shoes. But for me, um, the that little bit of hope that I had when I was still using, I that got diminished over time. Um, there is still hope, or there was, and that was revealed to me. And I wish everyone the best. I don't really have any like words of wisdom except for like for in my own life, everything's okay. Even when I was using the drugs, everything's okay. None of that stuff that we tell ourselves is real. Everything's okay right now. And I don't know. That's all I really have to say about it.
Dude, that's great, man. That's don't sell yourself short. That's very wise, and I think it's very true. I mean, it doesn't. It's not just addictions. I think a lot of people nowadays need to hear that. It's okay. You're okay, right?
Oh yeah.
And there's still hope. I mean, no matter what situation you're in, there's always a way that you can maximize it or make it better in some regard. But yeah, your story very inspirational, very interesting, and I'd love to get you and or your brother on this again. I'd love to have more conversations with you, man, because I feel like there's a bunch of topics that we didn't really get to, specifically the mystical experience. I mean, that's my jam. That's my topic of interest. So I'd love to talk to
Yeah.
you more about some of the insights and some of the sort of things that occurred in that experience.
Yeah, of course. And I'd love to talk to you more about it because I know that's something that your focus is on, is mystical like experience. Like you just said, I would love to just have more understanding of it, just talk to someone, because I can read all I can read and that's cool. But I'd like it'd be really cool to talk to you about it. And yeah, I think soon we can do this with Ryan. I think it was just kind of rushed, kind of last minute, which I enjoy. I'm glad that it worked out the way it did, but soon we'll do that. We'll have Ryan and myself and we'll just have a three-way talk.
That'd be awesome, man. And yes, the YouTube channel link is going to be in the comments below there. Dude, I wish you the best, and I hope to talk to you soon, man. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you so much, Oliver. It was really good to talk to you, man.
Cheers, brother.
Cheers.